Thank you so much, Ms. White. Please, you may pick up where you left off. Thank you.
Thank you. So we engaged the Child Welfare League of Canada with this work, and it, it took trips and meetings in Chajit with foster parents, with leadership, with other community members in both communities, of which I provided support to the Child Welfare League of Canada.
Wendy, Monsieur Chandandeshe, Eshenwa Wija Chinandeshe, Canada, Child Welfare Canada.
Child Welfare League of Canada.
League of Canada. Child Welfare League of Canada and the Dendeshe. Ja, was Michigan den in der Dendeshe G. What Machinandeshe na Kago Manjuasa. Magan de into say has Magan Dendeshe we know the Dendeshe Uchmasha. Uchma Dendeshe Nafinit Dendeshe no Sishan not Washish Magashi Hajish.
So a report then was prepared by them with 6 themes. The first one is relationships and a plan to support Innu children and families. And keep in mind, this is coming from an Innu prevention approach. So the first one was relationships and a plan to support Innu children and families.
Dendeshe new no Asia Totans new China. Danteshe Chegua Ashutahia new chat. Danteshe no and Danteshe and relationship new. Danteshe and Ayacham Mamu Danteshe F and relationship. Can only have done us. Denteshe we know Asia Jiwen Asia Ayat Chinwen Madocha and Noja Magana Jagua Enojas Enoji Magatoji. What was the last one? Jagwan in Siwa. Okay. And the Jeji to why Jeji stage one child to garnish while we diagnose and noja and so we hand some moja, Komoja Magohamoja. And when they stagnant in new terms, Jeji Nishnago Hagan time to garnish Nago Haganona.
So based on the report, there was also in the current day was to build an Innu prevention approach that is multi-year and step-by-step.
Magadante and Mishanagan no chickens new chat, where she seconds at down Jendishnago Haggins and Dante Jens with Chiganshi Totano no shot. Magadante Jeji Monostagans and Naje wine is a Totans and Ganesha Totans new.
Technical supports and expertise.
Magan on the hedge to the Nugand hedge and the hedge garnish we jagnoja. Jagans we jagnos magazines, Chendish Nago Haganage and Jagans while we jagnoja. And not just anything and dan the hedge and Chendish Nago Haganza.
Capacity building and training initiatives.
Capacity building
Initiatives.
Maganante Shenwan 도덕은 운이 차는데 해제지 마모스타는 지나자고 단전시 도덕은자 마그지가 안드스타근와 전시와 위작은 수원지.
Reintegration and placement planning for Innu children and youth, and to take an approach to ensure that cultural connections are being strengthened.
Dante 해제는 도덕은 지찬데 와스지 제지와 위작은 준노자 언제 와스지. 에논 대시 아버지 에노 느시나고 하신데 대시 에노 간신뉴도야 에고 단단 대시 아버지 스타그는 거 제지요. 느시 도덕은 자 지가 느시나구나.
And also the importance of infrastructure and capital. So it's important that we have those resources that, can build buildings that are required to do the work for program delivery and service delivery for child, youth, and family services.
Dante 뉴차 Dante 피테니사고 해나저고 단전시나고 해나 단전시나고 하근신 것도구나 아젠시위작은 진짜 에드카트근 조 완전시나고 사근자 오트카야 마그난테시 아토세오나 단테시 제지 먼스테지 제지 에야지 나피테니사고 힌 단테시 제지 스타근 진다저고 지가 아트카트근와.
So the work and the report that was done by the Child Welfare League of Canada, those recommendations, they are really the 6 themes that I just talked about, which drives Innu child and prevention services.
Tante시 아버지 머신안 근노한테시 에드카타스인데 노한테시 안한테시 가위나다 Child Welfare League of Canada 니냐 호전데 또고나나 제관데 찬단테시 저 에드카타스인데 덴테시 위노 와스진 단테시 prevention 노한테시 와스탄다 제지가 제지면 보내지 제지 오웨히 사그는 단테시 와스지 위노 제가 안시 또도 아그노자 제지면 원지.
So to the best of my ability, I have provided historical context from about 2011 to about 2015. And in 2015 is when I left the organization.
Tante시 위브제데 간 펀치 아버지 뉴차 단테시 시나군치야 간 단테시 가다 해노저가 단테시 2011 에고 단테시 Nakathindaniun Dante got to sit down and the 2015 de Nakaheniun Dente to sit up.
And I provided historical context of Innu prevention services weaved with my own lived experience and trauma. And that's driven by an understanding for Innu children with a similar experience as mine, but also empathy for those Innu children of today and tomorrow who deserve better. And I know Innu can do better when it comes to Innu prevention services and child welfare. Thank you.
Magandante 뉴차나 제관원한테 가와바한 단테시 덴테시 노주노 제니시도 다산 단테시 제관원테시 간나 푸느체 단테시 위버자 제지간을 지나고는 진대미노 ninniu chan seni heniu chan dende henwino no wasja dende heji eno jata ba henu de je wasa eje to agen ji aje ji chinu ni stan shinago ni benniu ni no men se heniu chan dende je dande o so de dende je eno de je wet nagen ni chan nanan de je eto nevin men seni tuma magen ni wet na komet naniu.
Thank you very much, Ms. White.
저는 흐뭇한다고 Ms. White 도
Okay. So I'll start my speech, I guess. I was hoping I wanted to read my affidavit, but it's too long. I might fall asleep. So I'll just touch on it, and if there's any questions that you guys have along the way, you can just let me know.
And just before you begin, that is P169. So that will be in your exhibit books, commissioners.
Very much.
I started with in a round table secretariat on October 1, 2018. And before that, I was working with various organizations in the community. I work with Shehadidino First Nation. I also worked with Innu Nation and Innu Development Corporation. And so when I started with IRT, I was just into 1 week of my position there, and then I was called to IRT main table meeting. And it was, even though with the previous positions, I used to attend the meetings, the same meetings, and then when I started, and then I went to the meeting the next week, and I was asked to chair. And I had no idea what I was doing. So,
Welcome to my world.
and the excitement I had at the time, there was a little work that IRT gave me just to translate just a small paragraph, and I had to translate that. And it was one of the events that happened with the main table, which was led by Canada, and it was called Main Table Meeting. Main Table, and so the paragraph I was translating for IRT was, in 2012, the Innu walked away from that table and said it was always talk, no action. And then it was in like a year and a half later, I think, they came back and said, this table is going to be Innu-led. And that was the only historic event that I knew about IRT when I started. And I was really excited. It's going to be Innu-led, you know. And so anything else that was involved in IRT, I didn't know, but I knew there was income support was delivered from there because I was a part of the signing of the agreement.
And then they sorry. Tade new chashan me win tente head to set up. Tante head chashan tente head 2015 so 2018. And tante head chashan shan me tante she 2018 wina tante she August. And then they had the session, then they say, oh, then they had the session, they say, Hajish, and then they have Jamauja, First Nations. Magan then they had the session Innu Nation. Magan then they had the second, then they say Innu Development Corporation, she had the new at the set. Magan then they has judgment, and then they have IRT. Magan then they say, Ukajane jashmenta then they no inte pissement out much 1 week tante ayagnishment then they into the main table then they have the condition then they jen sheto the hajet jet the hata hina I go minuaj then nan manch new charge and the new chair into the new and ante and on nagtaba hino nan manager Magandante minagnisibandante ano jen maneheniucha andante no taskanwa dante IRT naminukun no mishnangano jeji at Bashai hunyu jeji ayanyo ashwithman no te mishnangano magandante dante main table dante nan manager egontante 2012 nucha no jinten gathio jinte chantante dante main table meeting hotagnach maguna namano nasiho jinte cha na te matagunche kwanyu cha jeji na finje kwana chanje todo ka jinte pe ko push mag buha nio minwa jipne to hechinte nasi anonte hen si hanuni ontente she winwa onno jeji no jasa jeji utma utinte winwa onno jintante she tente she ka en fina jino jekwa wi baja jekwa na ka en fina jeko Benuen mo shibna nante she tente she winwa onno jas no ja maganante she jekwa no ante she jen finchi antente she income support ni hadonyo tante she todo magandante she winwa ante wakachno jasa.
And at the time I started with in a round table, I was out of the loop. I was working with the College of North Atlantic for a couple of years. And then I was working with the airline for a year. So I really wasn't in the loop for what was happening within the communities and the leadership.
Magandante she nucha dente he chashbantante he dente she juegat sente IRT contante he tashbantante she dente do sabanyun dente she kahna jo jovision dente College of North Atlantic ni hadena magandante she airline niwa pego punante wina do sim dente he kabminanja magandante she and mit sehen den yuta en function ni unten de je utmasha de utmaja.
And when I started working within a round table, I think there was 10 to 12 people under prevention services.
Magandante he chashbana ni unten de je IRT dante he ta pego no put ni sabta he change no jente na wat unten de to search de khan prevention ni hatwa prevention services ni hatwa.
And that's between two communities of Shehajit and Natoshish.
Gunjan jente na to hi jente mag she haji ni chang na ante she et khatas de.
So when I went in and did my orientation with Steve Drodry at the time and Kylie Rose, who's assistant director now, she was acting at the time when I went in.
Magandante gente we dente he paseta dente he to sete e data unte na Steve Georgery magna Kelly Rose ya hunte en gwente assistant en tab de shivente na Kelly ya e gonosh acting
Acting, don't know what that was.
dente he u khacha himende cha e shan me acting et tot mo bante na Kelly Rose.
So when I did my orientation with Steve, and they were talking about prevention services, and it just blew me away that province was delivering protection services, and it wasn't their mandate to deliver the prevention services.
Marketendeshe nyucha dandeshe ya tashimentan dandeshe katuguna entendeshe una pande prevention services knya denwa mukhati muhne no na bara chawino entendeshe province nje churchmaja nje mijimjma ka tosuja winwa weno deshe no chimo shibenje no protected services ni haten undo.
So I was trying to put my mind around it, and I guess I put it on a personal perspective. As a mom, as a mother of 3 children and a grandmother and part of the family, that how is this going to work? Because as a mother, you prevent your kids from getting into the system, and you protect your kids. And with those two not work together, for me, it doesn't make any sense. Because as a mother, I protect my children, and prevention is a part of it, that they don't go derail or something, like stuff like that. So that was, it appalled me that this service was this way.
Marketendeshe nyucha shan me jita pa hen nyucha neshna kwashniwa tandeni no en komo na nyucha magneshna eshna go hagen nyu eshna kwash nyucha tendeshe nestojin to asmijin te magnos menyo no homo nyu tante go chechi manapun cheteni hen nyucha tante wino tendeshe kanoji homo jenon teshe mijimjma janan te protected services ni hadma Magnanteshe prevention enoteshe chechi kaustabntuasa chinen emguamona chine chikuinagatuen maustuasmna egutantanteshe una pahmuge tanteshe wachechi atajata hochan chechi mananagatuan mach wasa dante no te wan fni hachen mi jimjmo dante he wino no jesa nang komo nyucha enante nagatuan mat ni to asma eno te he wona bahman nyucha no extension no me hag no wino no eno jesan cha mi jimjmo jenante he maganon te he wino wi at penetishna dante go chiga chi ya chechi manopuncha
So after that meeting, I was just thinking to myself, how are we going to work? How is this going to work for the Innu and for the province to work together on it? Because at the time, I don't think there was a working relationship that wasn't followed at many occasions. And it was there when I came in, and it was very, very hard to collaborate with the Newfoundland Child Protection System. And when IRT had their prevention services, we tried to communicate. We had disagreements, agreements, and all that with the province. When I say the province, I'm talking about the office. I don't even know what their name now, so I'm just going to say Protection Services. And I think it's just across from my office there. So when I'm talking about that, that's who I'm talking about, and the kids that they have in their system.
Magandante señorita nan manji andante teni henyucha dan deshe win wa dan je na finjina no je magan province jeji ya cha we je the same to cha dan deshe fincha ya ta ban ni na shot so mijma ya ta ban na fin ni sta magan dan deshe ego dan deshe pasian yun dan deshe eto set shan mia eno deshe pembentente Newfoundland eno nis no dia heno mijma no deshe was je nagatoen magan sa magan no deshe to kwat no dia heno nis to moshnan ga an magan den deshe win IR de cha and dan deshe win mijma cha eto to set gewina mijma eto set to kono den an new cha we sen yun den deshe moshnan gan jwa fen non de cha na province mijma 좀 모시는 거나 근데 미 모시는 건 좋아하는데 시하지 시에서 그러자 마게넌데 제 에노니스테시 뻔뻔나지나 mijma 에그다한테 제 에노데 단원데 제가 미호지 번호 제가 덴데 제 와스젠시도 도와간다 전시 위자간다 Intente se kevin pente kevin peade kevin mijma en ante se nista musnan ke no jaha
So when I was there, when I started working, I think there were 2 social workers. 3 social workers. 1 was in Natwashish and 2 were in Shehajit. 3 social workers were in Shehajit office. And there were 4 prevention workers and to serve the communities of Natwashish. There was 4 in Shehajit and I think there was 3 in Natwashish at the time, to serve the communities in preventing the kids going into care. And we didn't have any funding to hire any more than what we had. And I believe there was only a little over 500,000 to work with under prevention to prevent the kids or children going into protection system.
Magdante henucha dente het seta na Steven de mijma khojente mijma magnish nish ibn dente she hajinte dente hemishan gan trafficinte ko pe ko Steven dente hevin na to hinte ego nevi pensente abente na prevention workers and hata mag nevi pensente ke in she hajinte ego Steven de na to hinte ta en ante se wasanak to maza prevention dente hevin always en niste wichacha magante wascha ego mentite abch shonia nucha etto jeji attahaji swanjinte mogunte to ni ben ni ta no shonia no 500,000 yo magante se waschte enagten magan shan dente se protection system gan se atma wasje enagten magan sa enagto magan.
So in end of June 2019, there was provincial legislation passed for the Indigenous Representative Program within the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. That's a program that was delivered in other provinces, or the legislation was in other provinces in Canada.
Magan new chan de shunion da but ni ben new de prevention de shunion mishnan gan new chat to ni ben new chan dan de she no no chen de cha den de she Newfoundland magan de Labrador Mukua iabutin teabit questehen teabitin new chau dendeshe questehe utenasha eutendeabit tukuniban new cha and prevention legislation is ni hatama.
So we got a word from the province that the legislation was passed and that we would have inner representatives now, Indigenous representatives.
Kun nchan enu new cha da kajin tukwas new cha no deshe tukuna enu deshe mishnan no magana deshe chechi eya jinu kaji na funjin new cha no tukuna ante deshe province ego taujinde wenji tukajinde cha chechi tosechinde anch no jinde.
And so we find out pretty fast that we weren't getting the funding for it.
Chapano beneath my new charge to tukuna shunya tukuna mamina ganishin juno.
So within the Department of Prevention Services and the prevention workers that we had on staff at the time, we just changed their titles to inner representatives.
Kunante jen tashi bute hajen tan de chan dan take out the sage gan ni I hochen de prevention workers sa. Ego mino hajen katakan tashi hata hajen de
Indigenous representatives.
Okay.
Representatives.
tashi hata hajen de cha indigenous representatives tashi hata hajen de.
So just briefly explain what would that be to the best of my understanding. Indigenous representatives are the community members in the First Nations communities that would work for the inner organizations. So when there's a referral from the province protection system, they would have to get in touch with this Indigenous representative to let them know there's a referral coming, and they would be involved in that process.
Magadante she tente she ehyo tumga kawino tente she First Nations tente she nochen tente she vino eto tasecha tente she chechi nashna wa tente she ancha chechi tente het to kun tente she ancha no chechi yagan cha vino chechi with magan tente she the question no te she was it referral condition hatewa referrals no te she e was wa naganchia evident te she no cheno just tawchia and representatives can yahochi.
Innu representatives are also the advocate for the family in the court proceedings. They're advocating for the child and the families when court proceedings by the province in the protection system.
Magandente je Jennifer new chance Innu representatives and when you know that je biset ni abich dente je ni we shagan tawin cha was chan jen to agnes magan we han shmoja je de biset chano magan tawa.
They're also advocating for prevention to prevent the children going into the system.
Magan ya bache no just no bache no the prevention is not the je ga biset was is then they be then they me chimichimasha.
And the other, there was also around that time that there was another legislation through Canada that was passed in, I think it's called in respecting the First Nations, Métis, Inuit children or so, I think.
Took an even damage machine like a new chant and
And families.
Anna ni hade ju channel mission na respecting First Nations.
Respected First Nations, Inuit and Métis children, youth and families.
Ang wantente je no wasichin chama kan smetia. Jin spihen magnetsa. Ang tasteven you no mission na.
And the inner leadership had a meeting, internal meeting at the time to really discuss in taking over the jurisdiction of child and family services. And
마근진 어쩌마 어쩐지 아버진데와 안 외빈진데와 안 외빈진인 어쩐데 논대시 제니시 트간시 논대 안 모야 어쩐데 논대시인데 미지마샤 child family services. 단대시 child family services.
so at the meeting, we made a presentation with my colleague from IRT. And they were discussing how do we go about starting the process of taking over the child and family services. And so they gave us lead technical work. Like they gave the IRT that task to start looking at how would we go about taking over the child protection system from the province.
마근단대시 나는 만나진 단대시 에노 petition mo himchike ino anunteshi once chikandis nago IRT ya magana gadse himana bich wichin poshibna to de him tanteshi nguneno nan mo ge 단전시 또 다시는 대시 나 하원 된대 해미 좀좀 에고네 노 나는 야 되는 거야 에고노 에시 또 다사 에고네 노 지흠마 된대 대시 야차 원나 위다사 단전시 또 다시는 단전시나 와
So In Round Table has took over, which we call Inolar Development now. And we did some due diligence and did some research through across Canada with other First Nations. And just to start, how do we go about this work that was in front of us?
에고 단대시 IRT 에고네 노 웨트 노 거야 에노 대신 노웨 위나 제지 더베니 하이노 제지 빈니 하다 단전시 또 다사 에고 단대시 노지 뭐 힘잠샤가 제지 난또 세 마스데 그때 진짜 노시샤 단대 노 오테나스 단대시 캐나다 에노 대지 간시 또 동지게 위나 에고 에노 대시베 바체 관노 단전시 또 다슨 단대해 노아 와또 다산 단대해 제진스타 빈니 노 빈니 하치게 노 어떡하노.
So we started forming the committee for that, and also trying to find a funding through the federal government to start the work that we needed to do that was tasked to us.
마그단테 70분이 하면 진짜 아침에 10분째는 나 나한테 해줘 좀 진짜 커미디야 커미디 좀 20분째 한텐데 제주 텐데 해 20분째 쇼냐 텐데 federal government다 근데 좀 마시 전 제지 20분째 아버지 또 세우나 난데시 제너펀자.
So when we start this work, there was, I guess, there was an excitement and encouragement happening, and everybody was very motivated to start the work to establish our own child welfare system, and to start working on the initiatives that we need to get there.
막난데시 에논데 헤프니 하차제 이야지만 만나니 호흡은자 막에논데시 만나니 사그니네 논데시 에노제지 또다스노아 또다사 제지야 mbani hacha ego eno agtaga nande시 만나니 무진데 차나데시 오젠시나고 해단 완시나고 하체노이노 eno እንጨዋስች 나그도인 마그누자 자 welfare 하다 마그단테 해자시분자 제시분자
We, the IRT, it was, I guess it was time to find a funding. We looked through federal government. There was no funding of any sort for Innu to start working under jurisdiction to take over the child protection system.
마그단테 셰니온테 위노와 IRT 안 메니사그뉴 제지 마하스 쇼냐노 인텐데 셰윈 federal government 체오즈마샤 마토그뉴노 쇼냐노 인텐데 헤베바 제지노 제세노한테 셰 child welfare 인텐데 헤미치미치마
And we were told also that we have to be agency to receive the funding that other First Nations receive across Canada for prevention.
마근데 셰 헤노에슈이 마그나가 아브찬데 셰 퀘스테 헨데 위노 토콘타지노 단데 에이전시야 에이전시다 에이전시
무슨 말이지?
Tente que tu First Nation é minagno che no shonia non te je di bani has na wino que tu e non te je prevention na e ko metto conteni na ni wa
And which we worked like all angles to get this funding, and we couldn't get it, to the point that we had to go through Jordan's principal funding to run these programs of protection or prevention, I mean, and to hire more resources and to deliver programs.
Ego jen masa takatani non te je wanto e non te je jen je jigas nas ni shonia no mr no ji mo shon jen no ego magas no mo shon jen shonia no ego tente je Jordan's principle shonia sha ego tente je worship the maga non te je shonia no je ji to dasena prevention maga non te je kataga non te je no atakaya cha ego non te je yawe charge ni hoga then they witness Shoniano Jordan's principle.
And I keep thinking that the province of Newfoundland and Labrador has received unlimited federal funding to take our children from our communities and from their families, and we couldn't even get any money to prevent that from happening.
Ego new chan tante he mam ne he new national go new chan tante he church mas provincial ha. Tante he ni se simi nag mi nag no gan din stationia non tante he federal government wish mi no go. Ego ni na enteni he new cha kanji gas ne anteni he ni wa. Eno shonia no je jimi nag ke we no non te he wana she to wana she ta khata se no ni ste non te je den deshe wino utenamasha.
And just to go back about the agency part of it, because we did go to our bands and to designate IRT as an agency, and we went to the province. Province said they have no power to designate IRT as an agency.
Magandang deshe wayats wabni hacheno den deshe ya jejito kwashin denis noja dan deshe winwande enwa utnas jeji we sinocha agency hade dan deshe ya den deshe to heshim the ben sente meshim jan den deshe utmoja magandang deshe jeji bebo habat kuna jin den deshe agency nis jeji nis na hutsin jin den deshe winwande IRT ya ego den deshe chewjimash province much sihanishibna magan den deshe jeji ya gan chin winwa jeji nis jita magan agency in the IRT ya.
So when we got the funding from Jordan's principal, that's when we hire a few more people to work with the families and children.
Egon den yuchan de shuniano ga jigasna sin den deshe we shutna de Jordan principal ego den deshe jeji nishwija chenwa enwa nuwa ego den deshe ya we shibun mo ke shuniano.
And that was a very, very difficult process. We tried to work it out in all angles and legalities and all of that, and we just couldn't get it.
Ego je anamani ben yuchan un deshe wanishe tutasa anamana niuna no taskanwa no deshe wanishe tsganishe tutumpunja. Dan deshe jeji nista company hucha.
And that was a very difficult process. That's what's going on for 2 years, and we had the funding coming from Jordan's principal for 2 years. And while we're trying to get the funding for the prevention or the amount of money that other First Nations got over the years, the work was happening within the prevention department. They did a protocol with the province. We signed a protocol with the province on CSSD collaboration. We also hire more social workers.
Magda naman jishan yuchan den deshe enon deshe wanishe tutasa nishu punan niwa. Magan den deshe shuniano de we shubutasin den deshe the Jordan's principal. Enon deshe nan me hasen deshe eyach edo shuniawicha. Den deshe uchmawjin den deshe yuchan den deshe First Nations. Eyawjin de 지시분 어떠세요 뉴잔 단대시노 prevention 그는 하지만 마게는 대신 이제 미지미지 마우지 아버자 된대 에떡하야 마게는 대신 에노데가지가 스나세나브세 쇼냐노 엔데 에떡해 심지나 윈마나 미지미지 마운데 IRT야.
And I think we recognize that in order for our children to get into the system, we need the programs and services for prevention. We need the children to have the programs where they can go without getting into the protection system. and under the jurisdiction of the provincial government.
Maka dente he yutsa dante he wasa je no es khu tkan se to no ja es ji da ba tkan ji no dente he no je ji ben ji no de programs wasa jen ji ja kan ma no prevention no but niwa pampan no no de je en westo da se no de we no je pampan ha je no je wa dente he mo dente he meet ma sha the provincial meet ma
And that's how we got into this affidavit. So it's all there, you can read that, because we had, in order for us to get the funding for prevention that we have today, we did submit a complaint, I guess, to Human Rights Tribunal. The Indonesian submitted to really get the funding that we needed to do the prevention services, or to prevent our children from removed from our communities and from their families. And when all this work was happening, there was also other work that was happening in the communities. There's emergency placement houses in the communities. And there's also, they have to work to have a level 4 group home so our children can come home and be a part of the community, have a relationship and a connections to their families, and to prevent them from move to another community of non-native community, non-Inuit community, or out of the community. And that was happening between like two communities. The Natwashis have their own emergency placement in the community, and they also have established another one in Happy Valley Goose Bay with older children. So that's when we went into when we submit Canadian Human Rights Tribunal for our complaint. And
affidavit mission affidavit okay maka dente he mission mission te abja dente he et the maka ya no te he mission no Jamie sa gon te no mission no affidavit mission hatma no te he no shonya no kanto ni hasachan kaga minagan chan dente he ya shim cha na fat mo shim je dente he no ka kaya gan sa dente he human rights gan ya dena dente he fat mo ga dente he Indonesian which Indonesian treaty no kota dente he Indonesian jabe which we jagni shim ja magan te he shonya no wa bji hatsa dente he ni shi no na otena magan cha we han shmo ja ko mo jo ha mo maga to kuna dem an new na mi jo na emergency placement ya de dente he ni shi no na otena na to shi mak chajis maga no te he to ka shi no te group home dente he was check on magan cha ego to chejin dente he ta chen dente he otena ma was cha sha cheji dente he we to he go in was sa go dente he we han shmo ja go dente he cheji sen to cha ego dente he cheji ta cha was ja ba dente otena mas 근데 제 지간 가다 작은 천대 아버지 왔을 텐데 제 옷도 넘어서 텐데 제 니시안 아니온 텐데 제 옷도 넘어 나트와시 막시하지 있었던 뭐 제노한테 현대 emergency placement had no mi travan den he thatcha den nadoshi magante she dis magante she thousand te abch gat session de magante den he abibani mag to gona te abch ni no mi traf he abch was es nagat maganta and so kama me to ji was it
So during those 2 years when we were receiving money from Jordan's principal, we also had discussions for our prevention money with the federal government. And as we had this complaint to the human rights, they came back and said, okay, we'll give you this amount of money, and going forward, we'll look at it of how much you would entitle to it if you just stall your complaint for now. And we did say, okay, well, we can do that. And it took us a couple years, and then after a couple years, they agreed to give us the funding that other First Nations receive across Canada. And our complaint didn't end up in the proceedings of a human rights tribunal.
complaint star ego install to gona jegona no ji cancel to gona install ego stall ja magandante she ka jinde ni she punja tende he ya cheno anonno me ente shone no we she btasente ni Jordan's principal anonte she magni benonte he no te no ante she the prevention tende she prevention kan tende he shone no tende federal government kan to ni hasa antante she una visa se no chandente se ayat kan siwachnya nante se kayat kagam ne haseno kagam minagin chunya no intente se mino achintente se agnisimja federal government na to goza no te llega chito ta se no una vez se no cambia no hago cheno gan kata pues hagan chago de mina je penet ya sa mino aju imin go him jena na chewjma hago buta chip ta no ji mu je no mushinan no kamishan je ka jinde ni she punna ji ni she punna ja je ji mina gan cheno ni sta 제가 미는 거 나왔어 나셔냐 안돼 제 지금나 ego de he mina no shonia no te First Nations sin chiga mina gan chetente he ka ta 진짜 오때 남마신 진노 자 ego de no istman agno ga ego chike je jina bta ba je minu ko cheno chojma federal government
So that's probably all I have to say. But there was also one thing that I just want to mention regarding delivering the protection system, delivering the protection system. I know that we can do it because during the COVID 2021, 2020, 2020. Natwashish had to have like the province social workers had to leave the community, and our representative run that office for a few weeks, and they did amazing job. There were struggles, but what job isn't? So that's just the highlight that I wanted to share. And so the stuff that's happening now, that's Amanda is gonna talk to you in more detail about it. Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Andante henyo cha dante hengun mo jensi henyo magno ante she age nante he covid kan funjiniwa da 2020 na to hi hintente she kat se chen mi chima je dante she chiwe bno jente ego winwa on chen no jente pampani ha chen no mashnan kan jwa no te ni shim gasta ganyo ego nan mist na fini mis manona gno mogo bwe usta bno jente mogo chito to mo jente no chen kat se cha maga amenda eto chikwa wi mana katra chikwante.
Thank you so much, Ms. Benuen, and we'll continue. Did you want to make more presentations, Amanda?
I'd like to acknowledge Germaine and Wendy on explaining the story that I think the inquiry will need when it comes to forming your recommendations for Innu children and families for both communities.
Amanda ayon siyo chan deshe na eno deshe to sechinja mamua shanmia mageno Wendy mageno deshe no tabajumuna den deshe inquiry und den deshe una wita sacha jeji dan deshe jeji ya gna cha wawi astagna chan dan deshe mishna gni sha jeji wa bahasa anjaga anja Dante he katauji inquiry. Then he funa janwa no siya.
I'd like to give some context with regards to my personal experience and where that's given me the drive to do the work that I do on a daily basis for both communities, Shahajit and Natwashish, for prevention services. I was taken away from my birth parents from the Child Protection Services at 5 weeks old. But luckily for me, I remained in community. Hearing Wendy's experience, we both share an experience but are quite different and unique. Wendy has talked about being away from community, with child protection being involved in her life. I also have the same experience as being taken away from my birth parents, my Innu birth parents. But luckily for me, like I said, I remained in community, and eventually I was legally adopted by two loving parents. One, my adopted mother being Innu, and my adoptive father being non-Innu.
Tante she tante she nista jo with a Amanda en onte she nist effenta en onte she ab je fatu je jinte he no je he no te seuna en onte she kanta to sewa en tente he at se tente she win nos inisha no nos sina otena en prevention e no je ha ne je gan funche gan funche no je ha win to Amanda magandente she edente she eniuta pete ta me Instagram ta pone sisbna e wasiuta e wet naganta mo bueno enonte she una para chandente she wina che senita no te she kawo kanne ka te nagantente she de utena misha utena mash maganonte she che wawita hanistano et yata en fanta magandante she wina Wendy wina teo que utnagnism ne win Wendy teo dante she queste he ante dasnagnism tende he mijum smash we should nagantente tende she ke win west utente wa new cha anjenche di hainte nin ta win tende she win utena misha mageno nagatuen mokote ente no juega mageno nas wet no kote nante she no mageno mewen no te chano na pewa ustauna egna nagatuen mokoke manakatis nagnis benuina tende she haji sinte tash benante she haji sinte tash bena
Even though my experience was painful as it was for many people that are in my life, you know, I know in the end, my birth parents having to make a decision to give me up for adoption. I look at that as of them having so much strength to see that they wanted me to have the best care and the best chance at life when it came to my well-being as an Innu child.
Magandante she henunte she nan masha tente she win tante she win nagatuen maganta wet nagante ke wina tante he to kunne che chiun no cha magandante she chimis nagatuen maganta magano chechi kai chechi manpunta eguta tante she bes nagan ko chechi nagatuen magante chechi mano nagatuen maganta egun new question tente she aya kun tente she kutaka bueno chechi nagatuen magata
That experience, you know, it was definitely an experience that I had to face, and that also I also had to face challenges with that growing up as well. Challenges such as how I seen myself as an Innu person, how I saw my community, and how much shame I had because I didn't understand what was happening to Innu people at the time, because what I had witnessed living in the community was people in despair, people trying to escape the reality that they were living, and Innu people having to really face what their reality was at the time. And that came with a lot of having to see Innu people, when I was growing up, having to see a lot of Innu people intoxicated, having to see violence, hearing what non-Innu were saying about Innu as well at the time. I was exposed to a lot of that when I was growing up in the community. So when I talk about shame, I talk about my experience as growing up in the community. Even though, I was lucky enough to remain in community, there was challenges for me growing up in community.
Magan den deshe na fantaywin ay amenta at be bon yucha den deshe tabut town den deshe with the sisha den deshe we shnyuta utenamish tokuyano chegwa kenin una bahman yucha en ante he chegwa gameno jinyu magni nesh chita motionanyu magum man seni habna yucha magno abaheno chegwa yucha den deshe no gameno bunachndeo 제가 노노지 하고 춘데요. 에시나고 에시 뉴치 아비춘노자. 덴데시 에시 와바타 세노데시 에프느자 와바타 해노네 에프느진 덴데시 노아 노제는 프느지. 마이노 나마든와 맨느지야. 나디 하하이 마근 노지 하도나느자. 마근 덴데시 Entonces, ni sabe si en un no es suave, como que no te se caso que menos hago de una pasada. Tanto se tuvo que no hincha, no tanto se ni sabe si me se tanto se utenamish.
In saying that, as Wendy mentioned previously, the same goes for me as my past does not define me. I take that and that guides me into the person that I want to be and the helper that I want to be to Innu families, Innu community members, and to give the most support that I can in ensuring that Innu children and families are at the fort when it comes to supporting them when struggles do come along, because that's the thing in terms of, the communities having so much trauma from past outcomes. I don't let that define me. This is what keeps me going. As the director, as a community member, as an Innu mother, I do have children as well, and I've experienced trauma. So when I say in terms of, Innu having the answers, Innu have been taking care of children since the beginning of time. And because of the trauma that has happened. I know in recent hearings, the inquiry was also introduced to the Innu timeline and, what kind of impact that had on Innu members, Innu families, Innu children.
Magan den deshe en ante ka no med Wendy in cha en ante deshe en fanta ke wi na den deshe wi beta en ante deshe ho chiun gud nista no cha kan she tot men ante deshe chechi wi chat wenwa magan no wi chin ko ta chechi wi chat no ka ta ka ef ne chen ante deshe wasich kaut na gan cha no wasich magan ante deshe chechi nishnist wa wi chata Wichawishit nante ntente she utena mashante kan shina kwashi te wipecha kam sto staha kuchwenchia kamen hakucha ntente she wipech en kun shno chiwin kun anin ke ni new cha je jip mu hatta heno nista kan fanta chen jip mu hatta heno te he eto to set ya beja Tante nino nuho niu cha magnu tuasmenyo. Tabuega ninto kunche guande de hoste niu cha kanisha kagamun haguta. Magenun de shewi muchante nuet no chanchawi no anje tutumucha no enwan mano chakanisha toto chino seni muchakanisha nagten me juasa. Wibjede jawish nagten me juasa wasante. Magenun de shekayan muathin chiniun tante hearings katotuncha. Tutumucha no ante hecha guabachante no chante chano enunte she wibjede anante he enisa chnoja timeline ni hatama egunya bte hatas no chinte chano magan chwasacha dante he en fatto kwacha magan dante he ya o katugno timeline e dante he seni continue chan dante he dan fnibne o dante he tasapuna e dante he ya es seni continue chan dante he sen has no dan efnitsa.
When I started at the Roundtable Secretariat, I started in July of 2021. I am the first agency director for prevention services for the Roundtable Secretariat. And like I said in my intro, I was very excited to start my role because I knew that there was a vision. But that vision didn't have a roadmap of how we were going to get there. So a month prior, before I came to the IRT, there was an agreement that was signed between the province of Newfoundland and Labrador and the Innu called the Innu CSSD Protocol.
Magandante she niu tante she chashbanta eno mendoni tante she etsecha nunte he mugano chita bahmo tante nishna kwashin chen chita chen shna kwa ha chen shna kwa ha gncha tante mutugni ben niu che kwa no chigana sha tumu chan tante he mishna ngnisha tante he chen to he cha bacha magandante she ancha michma maganten no cha magano che kwa no tanjen shi the show that's the kata sebaja.
As soon as I started my job, I obviously needed to read the protocol in terms of understanding what this agreement was about. And I look at the Innu CSSD protocol as part of the foundation of relationship building with the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. And at the time, I think it's always felt that between the province and the Innu, it's always looked at or it's always felt like us versus them. You know, I don't think there was ever a relationship built concrete when it comes to really working collaboratively. Because, you know, one group as protection, having to do protection services, and the other group, the Innu group, having to do prevention. And the protocol, and I'm going to assume that the inquiry commissioners have that copy. And what it really is an agreement in really building the relationship, but also giving us, Innu, the opportunity to apply our services that, you know, that Innu families may be at risk of the child protection system.
Marketan deshe no chita ba henon tiun te janjigan testeuna tanjigan she tutugna protocol ni ya de nyu sa she bunanja. Marketan deshe tanjen shna kwashna. Den deshe win CSS tin de cha niste tutmuja no protocol no. Magenon deshe tan den jenish wijin to na she jeju wije to sem to cha. Jenish na kwashin new chan tan deshe en Tente he nishnago new chantan te winwa no nis wan she toda sa makan wino ke winwa wan she toda sa tente have mich moja gonna te makan un te en un te protection en winwa jita ba much te non te je tanjen ka chigan she tot much non te winwa wasa 제지 가나 펀스 트러스 에곤 게니나 에호드 마스 프리벤션이나 노지하니와 에고다 단테셰 뉴차 단테시니아네 미시나는 건 단테셰 인콰이리 단테셰 단테헤 간시 또도 제지 위치도 셈도 단테헤 데제는 펀자 Maar dente she child protection gnu ante system den dante she yabis nu tanjen kan na fun dente she winwa dente he no ja jen shui ja gan cha kan she tot mo jen
So when I say this was a piece of foundation for relationship building, I took it upon myself with talking with my team on how we can best work together, because it didn't make sense that at one side of the table would be making these decisions and we would be just there letting it happen. I want to give a few examples of some of the things that we've done in the last couple of years since I've been the agency director. And when I think about the relationships, I thought, well, currently I felt like there was barely a relationship. Everybody knew what they needed to do, but it was like, okay, how are we going to come to understanding of why this is so important? I had led with some of my colleagues at Prevention, and I spoke about, okay, in order for the province to understand why the Inuit is asking for what they're asking for, they need to understand. So I got with my group and I was like, I think we need to invite the province on Inuit territory. Not in offices, not in a formal meeting boardroom. Let's bring them on Inuit territory and have some real honest discussions. I invited the provincial directors that are in child welfare, and I also invited the zone managers of the areas that, the zone managers that are focused on the Innu zones. And there was huge opportunities to share openly and honestly. I was able to share about my history, which include racism. I was able to include and share about how I felt shamed, because I was shamed. And then giving information about how I really changed my mind about my history, not looking at it as a negative, but looking at it as strength. I think when I think about the relationships, right now, I feel that I do have a relationship with the province in terms of work going forward, but it took time because the important piece to that was never experienced, where provincial
officials or provincial directors ever had the time to be able to listen of what an Innu person had personally gone through. And I took the risk of sharing that with them at a retreat that we had a couple years ago.
Makan tante she winchan sihan ante she tante she boba je wije to semtocha tante he chakane shinago na je wije to semtochancha tante she wino amijimajima ancha noch kadu sahich wino ante mentai to seda tante nanukutni tante she Epastagan chicha jegona pe gunjinchimukuni and gunjinchimukuchata bahaswino and untehe one shwa bahasa and untehe chiganishinago nibana nisha puni chenu chantente she chejiba we shameshim jena chantente he cheji the question ja and uba jeji we just the same tocha maganuna cheji with matocheno jagwa 제가 너한테 해가면 문제야. 제가 너한테 해제 부하고자. eno beba jeji seni haske wino antente she wino noa tsagan she totum nis no jewa no dante she prevention eno jeji mnas to hasen no jewa no je kanto in hasa jewa no wa ba haske wino no ja ego no we shame she mjena ta no ni province Inchikado sa hitchin teo changu njo asham kaunte eno teshe jeji perasa ke no anten teshe no je efncha tente he ukacha engu no eho doge tabo jeji mishakanchi mageno nas jeji kokhno witase no kan fnchen no ja eno ante wets mountain ya we shibnja we shame shibnchen tente she michmichmash Magano and Chicado Sehed's own managers, Nijiahuja, Magano director, and Najatabath, and on the Heji Tabath, and Chanta Noa win effant Noa. Maganjan no Chicado Sehecha in no zones, Nijiahuja. And on the Heji a Yashabane wa with us. En want het effenet ego winata eyashban amenta wa with mushbanana chegwan no want he effenet ja kamen bunaji magen we to kuna jenu uwe ko hashna gna racism gna ya gna shini hada kamen jitab me kage shawana no en anteshe et mashi utne chante kamen no mudementa Nina tapat mo siya niya tapat mo ta. Makan ya bet enon te heme unen mo jeji taba man niyo chano kameno ja nas kameno ja. Engun jita ba he niyo chano usho siya muna. Makan te siya no siya tante siya jeji apestado chinchikataw jeji minto cha. Magano anteshe ministano seni mochente no anteshe efnji no ante chante anteshe wino province chukan eno te jeji na to hagu che tan anteshe es et bestoga with the measurement jeji with mocha ni intente hento henio jeji ni non te patmo shonio intente she weso heta en potente Una with manu, we know what the Bajamuna.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought, please. Ms. Rich, I'm going to ask a lead counsel to check with the parties and the witnesses as to whether we continue in the afternoon and then come back to the commissioners, let us know your decision. And also, you'll have to be in touch with the people we had lined up for the afternoon and maybe tell them there might be a bit of delay.
Yeah, I'm not finished.
안전 당노제 저거 보지. 앵은 전전 당노 진짜. Who are these guys? Who are they? Okay. 저거 떠져. 그나 또 뭐지? 간 뭐자. 앵은 전 당노.
Thank you. Another word from the commissioners, and that is earlier this morning you heard a disturbance in the background. We never saw it on our screen, but I've been advised that there was an unfortunate disturbing video or image placed by somebody who was a participant online, and it was quite disturbing for people who saw it. So I want to offer our apologies. At the same time, we will make sure that our technicians ensure that it doesn't happen again. Did you get that, Nympha?
Tante się nie czat. Czegłanta pethak ni bna czegłanta tante się no się tak kan manwa. Na czybni ben tante się bda na mancha na to tak na. Hego to ni się te czegłanniu. Tante się with magni się będzie be commissioner. Czegłanta to ni się ben tante owen tante się netto ha. En tante się jak ni się ben ta czegłanta czegmu ha ni się ben na no chan kun Mamanuska gujente owe mamanuska gujene wente. Ego jeji da minaj gan fanjang no was magni sinche kaya no je non da je no ana kapistebe no.
So we'll take a few minutes, allow council to speak about when we continue, and we'll be back, of course, and then make sure we notify the other presenters so that they may be delayed a bit.
Commissioner, if I may, I have notified the other presenters for this afternoon, and so they're satisfied that we should continue. And given the time, I would suggest we come back at 2 if that's acceptable.
Perfect. We're taking a break until 2 o'clock. Please, Nympha.
Da ni shun da minaj bi shun hana ju ji shi ben na no. An ji an ma chi ga